sat alone dejected, for a flat was something that was not expected. She began to sigh, then she caught the eye of a man in a Stanley steamer. It was not that she was stupid, nor the shot she thought she got from Mr. Cupid. It began to rain, then along the lane came the man in the Stanley steamer. Chug, 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 a hug was finally hers at last. She forgot the sky was overcast, and what happened is part of her past. But she vowed that she was nervous, so the crowd was not allowed to see the service. Now they both are hitched, and she's glad she switched from a thing she used to like, a deflated tandem bike, to the man in the Stanley steamer, to the man in the Stanley steamer, in the Stanley steamer automobile. You're a sight to make me tingle, you're a dish to make me wish I wasn't single. Never mind the jokes, they're just jealous folks, cause we're out in your Stanley steamer. If you find you're not inventive, then I'll bet you're gonna get a new incentive, and you'll lose your heart on the day you start going out in your Stanley steamer. Honk, 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 the tandem bike has had its day. If you're riding one, you'll find that they poke along in an obsolete way. We're full of bright anticipation, like a child who has a wild imagination. And we wanna ride inside of the ladies' motor deal. Wanna sit behind the wheel with the man in the Stanley steamer, with the man in the Stanley steamer, in the Stanley steamer automobile.
In August 1993, the Steam Car Club of Great Britain held its first touring rally. That inaugural event comprised 4 scheduled day-long tours and was centred upon the Welsh market town of Dolgelly. Management and planning of the 1995 event was undertaken by Yorkshire-based steam car owners Barry and Sandra Herbert, who selected the picturesque Wharfdale village of Burnsall as their touring centre, and mapped out 4 demanding routes within the Yorkshire Dales, guaranteed both to entertain the participants and test the performance of their cars in this delightful area of countryside. Headquarters chosen for the Yorkshire Dales touring rally was the Red Lion Inn, an establishment founded in the 16th century on the west bank of the River Wharfe. The cars, their crews and supporters arrived on Sunday. There were 16 vehicles ready to face Monday's tour, 12 Stanleys, 2 Whites, 1 blue and 1 brown, a 1924 Brooks, and John Liming's homemade locomobile replica, the Lycomobile. Operations were centred in the car park behind the Red Lion Inn, with an additional field allocated for transport and trailers half a mile away through Burnsall village. Last-minute adjustments were completed in time for the eve of rally dinner and Barry Herbert's welcoming address.
Welcome to the Yorkshire Dales, welcome to Wharfdale, and welcome to the Red Lion Hotel here at Burnsall. Looking back to the Welsh tour, it was a little bit up and down. The New Forest last year was completely flat. I think you've all had it a bit too easy. In the Dales, it's up and down a lot. However, the routes have been chosen very carefully and we've kept away from the really bad stuff. We're going to cover the usual plan. It seems to be a mixture that suits you all. Monday's a tour, followed by Tuesday. Logical. Wednesday's a day off for repairs, need I say? Or going off somewhere else. Thursday and Friday are touring days again. Friday night's the blowdown dinner. Similar procedure tonight. Restaurants at 7 o'clock, and in theory, the meeting starts at 9 o'clock. So it's tackle hills steadily, and on descending them use your reversing pedal to slow you down. The Americans, while they were at the Welsh rally, said the correct way of using the reversing pedal is the following. It's open cylinder drain cock, press the reversing pedal straight to the floor very quickly. If needed, gently apply a little steam. And I've written here, in practice you'll probably find you not need this, but I've been told today that some of the people who've done that show, some of the inclines today, they've found they've had to put a bit of steam on the retro braking just to slow the car down a bit. So, having put a bit of steam on, when the vehicle is slowed down enough, take the foot off the reversing pedal and close the cylinder drain cock. The main thing is, don't let the vehicle pick up speed. Tackle it very slowly. If you find your brakes get hot, stop and let them cool down. And conversely, if you find you're running out of steam going up a hill, well, you're going to have to stop anyway and generate some more. Just take it slowly. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the first evening of Yorkshire Dale's hospitality.
And the best of luck for the rest of the week. And so to the opening day. The tour begins with a 46-mile run to Aysgarth Falls. Cars are directed through Burnsall village, heading for Thresfield, to follow B6160 and eventually cross the River Wharfe into Kettlewell. The route continues up Wharfdale to Bugden, and then climbs via the hamlet of Cray over into Bishopdale, passing through West Burton before leaving B6160 to ascend a demanding 1 in 5 climb to reach the A684 and the village of Aysgarth. Drivers then retrace the outward route back to Kettlewell, before taking the narrow lanes through Coniston, skirting Grassington to Hebden, and finally returning to Burnsall over the stone-arched bridge. Unlike the cars of today, the steamers require boiler preparation to raise pressure before setting off. Bob Dyke is preheating his 1914 Stanley's pilot burner before turning on the main burner fuel supply. Event organiser Barry Herbert has his 12-seater Stanley mountain wagon ready for filling its water tanks. Whilst these two similar Stanleys, both built by John Gould, have yet to raise steam, John Gould's car is already emitting the characteristic high-pitched hum from its main burner, whilst David Webster checks out the fuel jets before lighting up the boiler on his car. But now the first day's tour is underway. That was Peter Salmon and Philip Hopes in the 1908 Model EX. Dr. Robert Dyke's 1908 20 horsepower White is next to leave. The White has a 2-cylinder compound engine and a 2-speed gearbox. Basil Krask is next in the Lycomobile. He's followed by John Liming with his 1911 Stanley. The cars head for Threshfield, en route to Kettlewell, and the Lycomobile's burner is on full song. Back at Burnsall, it's David Goddard's 1910 Stanley. He's closely followed by Bob Dyke's 1914 Model 607. John Liming speeds through Threshfield, and the cars head northwards past Kilnsey Crag. A downhill run brings them into Kettlewell. Entering the town over the River Wharf, cars leave by the Hump Bridge over its tributary, Park Gill Beck. David Goddard arrives at Kettlewell, whilst the little Leica steams onwards through Starbotton. He's followed by John Liming. Jeff Theobald's 1924 Brooks purrs after them. Back at Kettlewell, Bill Rich decides to stop for water, and Peter Cookson puts the water lifter hose into the River Wharf.
Stocking? Yeah. Right? Yes. Yeah.
The car is a 1916 Model 726, and Bill answers the questions of two interested onlookers while the tank is filling. Meanwhile, Bill Lowe arrives and steams past in his 1913 Stanley. Peter Cookson and Bill Rich stow away the hoses to resume their journey. Further up the valley, John Liming too has stopped for water, and we move on to Bugden, where patrons of the Buck Inn are able to watch the procession of steamers on their way to Cray, and the first of the day's major hill climbs. First on the scene are John Gould in the newly rebuilt model, and then David Webster, closely followed by the Goddards. Next comes Jerry Stoneman in his 1917 Stanley Model 735. John Liming leaves Cray as Bob Dyke arrives. We next see the White Stanley crossing Bishopdale Beck. While they head for Aysgarth, Jeff Theobald put some spare steam to good use, and Peter Salmon and Philip Hopes climb out of Wharfdale. They're followed by Bill Lowe. Once over the summit, the cars descend into Bishopdale. Meanwhile, Jeff Theobald has had his cup of tea and sets off in pursuit. Sting in the tail of the morning run is this entry into Aysgarth. The Goddards and Jerry Stoneman make it look easy, and John Gould and David Webster are not far behind them. However, Bob Dyke's Model 607 finds it hard going. The Herculean efforts of cars and passengers failed to impress the natives, and even Peter Cole's steamy ascent received little attention. And so, to the lunch stop. Do we really have to go down there? Meanwhile, Bill Lowe is having his own fun and games on the 1 in 5. The passengers trudge after him as Peter Cole arrives for lunch. One in 5 is 1 in 5, especially if you have to walk it. Arthur Thompson in the 1904 White arrives as John Liming sets off for home, and Bill Lowe's crew struggle upwards.
What failures have you had?
Oh, it's happened,
And you can edit that bit out if you want to sell the video.
Philip Hopes and Bill Rich are still heading for West Burton and the infamous 1 in 5, where we watched Barry Herbert's ascent in the 12-seater. Event organisers Barry and Sandra were acting as backmarkers. At Thoralby, It's Bob Dyke heading up Bishopdale on his way to the long, long climb to the summit at the Richmondshire area boundary. The mile-long climb rises over 450 feet, with a last severe pitch of 1 in 5. Peter Cole makes a steamy, steady ascent. He's followed by Jerry Stoneman. After exchanged greetings with Bob Dyke's crew, they press on as David Webster and John Gould make their ascents. The lighter cars found it a little easier, but failed to impress the grazing cattle. That was left to John Liming in the White Tornado. Once over the summit, it was down through Cray and back into Wharfdale. Through the S-bends and over the narrow bridge. Through Kettlewell, the cars took the minor road along the east bank of the river. The Stonemans are now heading for Grassington. At Grasswoods Nature Reserve, it's the Brooks and Bill Rich in convoy. Much to the surprise of a couple of ramblers. As they steam onwards, Arthur Thompson appears in the 1904 White. It's not long before they're crossing Burnsall Bridge to complete the day's run. This was Arthur's first major outing with WS-28, and he can be very satisfied with the outcome. At Hebden, Barry Herbert swings the 12-seater onto the Burnsall Road, and it's not long before he too is back at base. It's been glorious weather. There have been some tough climbs, but everyone has got through, and all are now keen to discuss their day's events. Barry Herbert, Jeff Theobald and others relax after their journeys, but Arthur and Frank Thompson spend time working on the car. Made by the White Sewing Machine Company in Ohio, they have an underbonnet mounted vertical two-cylinder compound engine with a radiator condenser and a two-speed rear axle.
Do you think that's tightened up there enough to...
How does it feel? Does it feel tight, Robert?
I can drag it round with this. Right?
Yeah. Shall we push it right up
No,
front
I
of you?
feel myself, you know, you've got something on your mind, but it's not quite right.
Far up in there, is it?
Not very far, is it?
No.
They adjust the piston rod glands ready for the next day. Tour number 2 involves a 56-mile round trip. Drivers follow the previous day's route out of Burnsall for the first mile, before tackling a demanding diversion along a narrow 1-in-6 climb through the small village of Thorpe. They are then directed via Linton to the B6265 through Cracoe before taking the minor roads via Hetton, Winterburn and Carlton to Hellifield and the A65. Northwards now to Long Preston and then more minor roads via Wigglesworth, Rathmell, Lauchland and Orstwick to Clapham for lunch. Cars return over the hill road to Settle and then climb again over the moors to Kirby Malham before turning into Ayrton and retracing the outward route via Winterburn, Hetton and Cracoe to reach Threshfield and return to Burnsall. It's another fine day. David Webster and John Gould are raising steam for the morning's run to Clapham, and Arthur and Frank Thompson take the 15 horsepower White up to the watering point. After yesterday's gradients, everyone wonders what is in store. They soon find out. Only a mile and a half from the start. This narrow lane has gradients of 1 in 5. Jeff Theobald's Brooks has no problems, but Bill Lowe runs short of steam and has to restart on the steepest part of the climb. We followed behind Peter Salmon and Philip Hopes in the little EX. Once over the summit, it's downhill into Thorpe, a small hamlet from where the only way out is up. Arthur and Frank Thompson encourage their burner to greater efforts. Several cars had problems on the Thorpe section, and Bob Dyke's car is having piston rod glands adjusted to improve its performance.
Why don't they put the engine on the roof? Oh, Jesus, get out.
The rear axle mounted engine in the Stanleys makes roadside adjustments difficult and particularly unpleasant in wet weather, but from now on it's easy going. Southwestwards through Linton and Cracoe to Hellifield, then north along A65 to Long Preston, where cars turned westwards to a convenient mid-morning break at Wigglesworth. Once adequately refreshed with tea, coffee or whatever, from the Plough Inn, the crews prepare to run the remaining 11 miles to Clapham. John Liming consults his route card before setting off. Their route eventually rejoins the main A65 at Giggleswick and follows alongside the Carnforth link to the Settle and Carlisle railway line, which leaves the old Midland route to the north at Settle Junction. The sign here means whistle. Let's see if they will. The route then follows the minor road through Lauchland to Orstwick, a hitherto quiet backwater far from the noise of traffic until now. Only a mile and a quarter to the lunch check. Jeff Theobald and the Stonemans are next to appear. And here we are. The new inn is host to the rally crews, and the vehicles are eventually stabled behind the hotel. Bill Rich and the Goddards make an early, unobtrusive appearance, in contrast to the arrival of the Norfolk Philharmonic. Singly and in groups, the cars roll in, and it's time for a drink and a chat. It's been a very pleasant morning's run, and the crews look forward to a leisurely lunch. John Gould, David Webster and the Goddards decide to extend their tour by visiting the famous Ribblehead Viaduct and make an early departure in convoy. For the rest of the group, their route retraces its path to Orstwick. Basil Krask checks to make sure that the rest of the orchestra is in sight. Bill Lowe's boiler is also on full song as he begins his afternoon run. It's been an entertaining time for the New Inn's regulars, and it's not over yet. Barry Herbert has been backmarking again with the mountain wagon and arrives as Robert Dyke is about to leave. Onwards now, through Orstwick and Wharf, onto Swarth Moor, past the busily operational dry rig quarry. The crews have excellent views from here before coasting down through Little Stainforth. Four more miles will bring them to Settle, but not the A65. For today's real test is the hill road to Kirby Malham. Much of this mile-long climb is at 1 in 7, and the ordnance map shows some sections steeper than 1 in 5, and this is just the beginning. Best climb of the day at this point was by the lightweight Stanley EX. In contrast, Barry Herbert's mountain wagon's ascent was a nail-biting touch-and-go affair. Barry kept the Stanley 812 on the move, but was to pay the penalty later on. We'll leave them to it as Bill Rich comes to a halt farther up on the 1 in 4, conveniently alongside our camera. Peter Cookson gets out to chock the rear wheels, whilst boiler pressure is restored.
I'm going to keep the brakes on that one on the shot.
Recovery is not long, and it's bye-bye blue. Who needs enemies with friends like this? As Peter follows the departing cloud of steam, we'll follow Jeff Theobald in the Brooks, and also watch Robert Dyke and his crew's separate progress on this killer of a hill. At around 2.5 tons, the Brooks' performance against hard collar work, though not visually dramatic, was truly great. Here they are again, higher up on Scothrop Moor. After their sterling climb out of Settle, Peter Salmon and Philip Hopes are forced to stop above Scaleba Force to restore boiler water level. The engine-driven feed pump performance is below par, and they are using this well-tried method of running the engine to recover the situation. With everything now back to normal, they are able to set off in pursuit of the Brooks. Back at Scaleba Force, Bill Lowe makes up for lost time. It's Kirby Malham village, but still 13 miles to go. Arthur and Frank Thompson have to resort to some energetic work with the fuel tank pump to keep going. They managed to do so, and the next seen cruising through Kirby Malham. It's been a really tough afternoon for cars and crews, tempered perhaps by the fact that Barry Herbert's mountain wagon has also fallen victim to the severity and length of the climbs out of Settle. The boiler was mortgaged to the hilt, and fuel from the rear tank couldn't be fed to the burner system. Fortunately, tomorrow is a day set aside for repairs and servicing. It looks as if it will be needed. It's Wednesday, and the weather in the Burnsall area is still fine despite severe thunderstorms in some of the surrounding areas. The village is almost deserted, but in the car park behind the Red Lion Inn, Barry Herbert and Company have sorted out the mountain wagon's boiler problems and turned their attention to other matters, like the repacking of piston and valve rod glands. Well, maybe, but first, let's have another cup of tea.
Well, only packing the motor came to traction engine and
Yeah,
motor car.
that's right.
They finally decide to move the wagon and identify the source of leakage.
You've had a bit.
Sure enough, the leakage is traced to the two valve spindles. Peter Cole warms up the 735B.
Were you on that steep hill over Settle?
They missed the Tuesday tour and were able to assist others on the infamous Settle climb. The car has been uprated to 30 horsepower and now has disc brakes on the front wheels. For them, and for some of the others, it's a day for polishing in readiness for the Thursday outing. We took the opportunity to accompany David Webster in his 1911 Model 63 on a journey into Grassington for fuel. Up in the field, Bill Lowe has removed the burner hearth from beneath the boiler of the Model 65. I asked him the reason for this repair. Bill felt that the burner fuel preheating pipe was getting too warm and is adding more insulation to moderate the temperature. For some, the fine weather provides an excuse for some local sightseeing journeys, and for others, a miscellany of routine checks and adjustments. Meanwhile, the mountain wagon is having further gland checks.
If you go out, John, look down, and let me go down and drive past you, we'll find definitely which one it is then, won't we?
Well, that's the other side. It's the side you packed.
Restoring the white to a spotless blue, here's Harold's verdict on yesterday's hills.
Well, it could have been worse.
We'll leave Barry Herbert wrestling with the Stanley engine's gland nuts and rejoin David Webster, now well on his way to Grassington.
Am I going too fast for you or not? Say you're going to as well.
On a 50-50 diesel-petrol mixture, the car returns about 10 to 12 miles per gallon on the hard going experienced during the last couple of days. We'll leave them to fill up the tank with fuel for tomorrow's tour. For those who wish to do the full tour, today's run covers 55 miles. It leaves Burnsall via the Wharf Bridge and uses the sometimes steep and narrow lanes via Aptrick to reach the B6265 heading for Greenhow Hill and the long steep descent to Pateley Bridge. From here the route turns northwards up Nidderdale via Ramsgill to Lofthouse, where the Crown Inn provides a welcome lunch stop. Optional tours from here include a 7-mile trip to the Scarhouse Reservoir, a visit to Housedene Gorge, and a view down the dale from the elevated position of Middlesmoor Church. Cars will then follow the road back to Pateley Bridge and cross the River Nid to go via Willshill and Dacre to Thrushcross Reservoir, where they cross the dam and climb over the moors to reach the A59. 5 more miles brings them to Bolton Abbey and the B6160 back into Burnsall. Though not strictly within the national curriculum, the school children of Burnsall are given the opportunity to learn something about these unusual vehicles. After Bill Lowe, it's Robert Dyke's turn to face a barrage of questions from his young audience.
Work gas up the middle, and that little thing works the gas. This source over 80 years ago. And this was Mr. Garton's car. The oldest car bought on HP, it is.
This time, the cars are to leave Burnsall via the bridge over the River Wharf, and it looks like being another good day for the open tourers. Barry Herbert has once again elected to be back marker. The little EX hurries on past this wayside inn, followed by David Webster. The cars will soon be facing a 1 in 5 climb. From Wharfdale, the route climbs up over Greenhow Hill and then down the 2-mile descent to Pateley Bridge, where we turn northwards along Nidderdale, where the Watermill Inn provides us with a spacious car park and a well-timed mid-morning break. The contingent is completed by the arrival of the 12-seater mountain wagon. The The weather is certainly staying warm, and many crews take the opportunity to compare notes and fill up with water for the run to the lunch stop at Loft House.
Right, Peter?
Yeah, Harold? Yeah.
I went on between two roses.
No!
Between two roses. The roses be too bloody tall.
As Jerry Stoneman leaves the car park, the Goddards are passing the York Arms at Ramsgill. They're followed by Bob Dyke in the 1914 Stanley. One by one, the remainder of the cars set off, and at the York Arms, it's Robin Hill in his 1921 Model 735B who appears next. We'll carry on up the dale with Barry Herbert.
I said, that's all right. I said, what's the matter with you?
2 more miles will bring us to our lunch stop at the Crown Inn. Let's stay and watch some more of the arrivals. It's a narrow road here, and Jeff Theobald holds up traffic for Jerry Stoneman. The steam car activities create a deal of interest from the Crown Inn regulars. David Goddard adjusts the burner fuel supply to his satisfaction as John Gould uses boiler blowdown steam as a hand cleaner. From here, the route card suggests 3 alternative optional trips: a visit to Howstein Gorge, a climb up to the vantage point at Middlesmoor Church at the head of the dale, and a 7-mile trip to Scarhouse Reservoir. The Goddards and Stonemans set off for one of these tours. The little EX makes a late arrival. They've had trouble and broken one of the longitudinal chassis members. Nothing daunted, a makeshift repair is carried out with modern adhesives, Jubilee clips and a piece of sheet metal.
Yeah, you've got enough there now, sir.
Can you really whack it? That's not even.
No.
A bit more.
Of course it pivots. That's why it pivots there.
Got two in the middle running oil. You have. Service brakes are in there. In the diff. Foot brake is in there.
The repaired member is secured to the lug on the front axle and left to set, while the crew take a belated lunch.
On there you'll be braking hickories like there's no...
Barry Herbert fills up with water, ready for the tour to Scarhouse Reservoir, whilst Peter Cookson talks with Robin Hill about the 20 horsepower Model 735B's Baker burner and Maxwell pilot system.
We're still on white paper. Put it on slow.
Bob Dyke gets underway, and Robin Hill too leaves for the afternoon run. Middlesmoor Church commands an uninterrupted view down Nidderdale. David Webster decided to pay it a visit. Well, you were warned that it was 1 in 4. His passengers aren't so sure that it was a good idea after all.
Cut.
Their one consolation is that the only way out from here is downhill. Meanwhile, Barry Herbert is taking the old waterboard road to Scarhouse Reservoir.
Good, yes. Yeah.
They first pass Robin Hill on their way up, and then several of the others.
Oh, it's died.
Good picture of the skyline.
And here we are at the dam. The low water level due to the prolonged dry spell is very evident. We'll leave them to make the inspection of the reservoir and dam and go back to Ramsgill. John Liming is followed by Robin Hill. On now, through Pateley Bridge, Wills Hill and Dacre Banks, to drop down into the Washburn Valley. Once again, the low water level is clearly evident. One by one, the cars make their way across the dam, but now the open tourers have their hoods up. The weather has turned much cooler, and by Bolton Abbey it's raining. Although this brief heavy shower is a bit of a disappointment, the kids here seem to enjoy it. As Robert Dyke coasts down into Burnsall, Arthur and Frank Thompson are leaving Bolton Abbey. The weather finally brightened up again, giving hopes for a dry day for tomorrow's final tour. For the survivors, the final day's tour is a leisurely 37 miles to visit the Yorkshire Car Collection at Keighley. Drivers follow yesterday afternoon's road through Barden to Bolton Abbey, and then head along A59 to Skipton. From Skipton, the route takes A629 to Keighley, where the car collection is well worth a visit. Retracing A629 for 3 miles, the drivers take 6034 via Silsden to Addingham, where they join the 6160, leading back to Bolton Abbey, Barden, and a journey's end at Burnsall. After yesterday's riding and walking with the Websters, the Coles decide to revert to their own car, and almost everyone is prepared for a cooler day. Here we are, back at Bolton Abbey once more. And just to confound everyone, the sun has come out in strength. Barry Herbert steams past the Devonshire Arms on his way to Skipton, gateway to the Dales. The castle here dates back from Norman times and was restored in 1659. Friday is market day here in Skipton, and the steamers have to contend with a congested main street on their way to Keighley. Not particularly backward in advertising its whereabouts, the Yorkshire Car Collection has a surprising number of interesting exhibits. The mountain wagon arrives with its near-side chassis member adrift. The front axle bolt has come out and will need replacement. Most of the cars were watered here, either before or after the crew's visit to the museum.
Anyway, they've obviously realised that something was going on. Paid to the organisers, and they got moved on to the next.
It's a well laid out display, with something of interest to everybody, with cars both ancient and modern. But time is limited, and there's still the run back to Burnsall to cover. John Liming makes ready for off. John Gould, David Webster and Bob Dyke follow in quick succession. They're headed for Silsden and Addingham, where the Goddards are steaming past. Back at the Devonshire Arms, John Gould decides to stop for water. The steam ejector, which is used as a water lifter, will soon have the tank filled, and they can stow the hose and be on their way. Bob Dyke is of similar mind, and he too stops for water here. A couple of the car's contemporaries look on as John Gould departs. Our elderly visitor is only too ready to reminisce about the good old days, before Bob and Richard Hounslow are ready to go. As his father departs in the Stanley, Robert Dyke in the 1908 white Model L steams past. But who's that in the back seat? It looked like David Webster. With the brown white and the mountain wagons safely past, we find the Brooks leaving Bolton Abbey. Oh dear, that was David Webster getting a lift with Robert Dyke. The Stanley's boiler tubes have loosened in the bottom tube plate, and that's the end of his rally. So near, yet so far from finishing. What a pity. The Stanley has to finish its journey to Burnsall on the back of a trailer. I'll bet there were some new words added to Webster's dictionary. So that's it. The Yorkshire Dales touring rally for steam cars is over. Boilers are blown down and cars put back onto the transporters which brought them to Burnsall at the beginning of the week. It's been a grand touring rally. The weather couldn't have been much better, and although some of the hill roads were a severe test of stamina for crews as well as cars, the routes were full of interest and the Dales scenery magnificent. John Gould summed it all up.
The car is really a complete rebuild. It started life with a set of water tanks and an original engine and gauges and a lot of stuff we collected, and we paid a lot of attention to rebuilding this car to be exact to its original copy. It's gone very well. We've not had to take a spanner out, I believe, only once for a minor adjustment so far. But it's been a tremendous event, and the countryside is just absolutely fantastic. It's another dream come true to come to, I think, to come to Yorkshire and tour it with a steam car. Yeah. So that's been absolutely fantastic, and I'd like to think we could do it again another day. But,
all that remains is the blow-down dinner and farewell speeches.
We're all turning up. We're all, good time to have together this week. Look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you for being our guests in the Yorkshire Dales. Thank you. Bye.
I think on behalf of everybody, I can say that we've all had a super week. We had a wonderful time. The tours were extreme, but we put up with it. We'd all like to thank Sandra and Barry for putting on a super tour. And I mean, just absolutely great.
Yes, they'll all remember the Yorkshire Dales for years to come. In the Dales and in the valleys, these eccentrics hold their steam car touring rallies. Like our canine friends who are round the bend, they go out in their Stanley steamers. On the road, they never worry. If they hold the traffic up, why what's the hurry? For it's not a race, just a measured pace when you're touring in a Stanley steamer. Chug, 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 chug. The rhythm barely breaks the hush. When you're touring, there's no need to rush. And if hills are steep, you get out and push. But if you'd like to go a little quicker, get your boiler burner off its pilot flicker, then you'll speed along to that humming song. And with faces wreathed in smiles, you'll just gobble up the miles when you're touring in your Stanley steamer. When you're touring in your Stanley steamer, in your Stanley steamer automobile. If you'd be a rallying contender, fix your car and put away that open-ender, then you'll be a star like the Limings are when they're touring in their Stanley steamer. If you maintain a living style that's gracious, and you'd rather like to have a car that's spacious, Barry Herbert's King is the very thing to go mountaineering in a Stanley steamer. Honk, 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 like Kenneth Graham's Mr. Toad. Though you may not be quite a la mode, still you'll feel that you're king of the road. And if you fail with your combustor, Mr. Gould will make you want to pass the muster. Then, like Dr. Dyke, you'll forsake your bike and be happier by far in your horseless motor car when you're touring in your Stanley steamer. When you're touring in your Stanley steamer, in your Stanley steamer automobile. And though it's not particularly British, for some consider steamers rather skittish, yet it's all the rage in the US of age to travel in a Stanley steamer. There's no need to be at all pedantic. It'll only drive all other drivers frantic if you adopt a stance of pure nonchalance. As you say, what was that? As you steam on your way. So just beware, you level-headed thinker, ere you fall for Stanley's rod, hook, line, and sinker. Their hypnotic smell weaves a powerful spell, and you'll find your goose is cooked when you're well and truly hooked by the magic of the Stanley steamer. By the magic of the Stanley steamer. The Stanley steamer auto.